Long ago, nestled between rolling hills and dense palm groves, there was a village called Aiyetoro, the land of peace. Chickens roamed freely between mud huts with thatched roofs, children played in the red earth, and the scent of roasting maize drifted from cooking fires as women pounded yam under the shade of Iroko trees. In this village lived a man named Babatunde. He was not the richest nor the strongest, but he carried a quiet strength that made even the elders pause when he spoke. Babatunde was a farmer, his hands hardened by the soil, his spirit softened by wisdom. He would often rise before the first cock's crow, kneel on the bare earth, whisper a prayer to Olodumare, and begin his work. His farm was never the largest, but his yam tubers were the fattest, his cocoa trees the most fruitful. Many said it was because Babatunde spoke to the land, and the land loved him back. Children followed him around, eager for stories. Women trusted him for counsel, even the aged Baale. The village head once said, Babatunde is like a river that never runs dry. But peace, like the river's calm, can hide dark currents beneath. In the same village lived Ajani, a celebrated hunter known for his speed and precision. His trophies hung from the entrance of his compound: leopard's teeth, gazelle horns, and even a python skull. People feared him, but few truly liked him. While Babatunde won hearts with kindness, Ajani demanded loyalty with sharp eyes and louder boasts. To Ajani, Babatunde was an irritation, a humble man who had done nothing grand but was praised more than him. What is a man without weapons? Ajani would scoff. All this farming and talking, does it feed a village in danger? Jealousy is a silent fire, and Ajani's fire had been smoldering for years, waiting for dry leaves to spark an inferno, but Babatunde never noticed. Or maybe he did, and chose silence as his shield. It began with whispers. As the seasons shifted and the rains delayed, the village of Aiyetoro entered a time of uncertainty. The cassava grew thin, the plantains drooped too early, and some said the river's song had changed. The elders gathered more often beneath the oak tree, casting cowries in silence. That was when Ajani began to speak. He never accused Babatunde directly. No, Ajani was too clever for that. He would lean close to the younger men during palm wine gatherings and say things like, "Strange, isn't it? Only one man's farm still grows while others fail." Then he'd sip his drink slowly, watching their faces twist with doubt. Or he'd approach mothers at the stream and murmur, "My sister, have your children been sleeping well?" No? Perhaps the spirits are unhappy. Perhaps someone has bound the village's fortune to himself. The word spread like termites in dry wood, quiet but destructive. Some believed it, others did not. But when a small boy fell ill and babbled strange things in his sleep, his mother swore she saw Babatunde's shadow standing at her doorway that night, even though he lived on the other end of the village. That was all it took. The next day, Ajani stood before the elders, chest high, voice steady. "I come not with accusations," he said, but with concern. Aiyetoro is sick, and we all know whose shadow stretches longest in this village. There was a pause. The crowd gathered, eyes turned. Babatunde, calm as ever, stepped forward. He didn't defend himself with anger or tears. He simply asked, "What proof do you seek? I have nothing but open palms and a clean heart." But fear had already woven its net. One elder, Pa Olaolu, shook his head. "We cannot afford to ignore this Tunde. The land is groaning. Perhaps it is your time to step away until things settle." "Step away?" Babatunde asked. "From the land I till? From the people I love?" It was Iyalode Morenike, the oldest and wisest woman in Ayetoro, who rose with her walking stick and said, Babatunde has always been a son of this soil. Be careful not to pluck the Iroko just because its shadow is long." But even her words, seasoned as they were, could not hold back the wave of fear. The villagers wanted peace, and if that meant silencing one man to restore it, so be it. And so a judgment was passed, not by truth, but by trembling hearts. The sun refused to shine the day the elders gathered beneath the sacred Iroko tree. Clouds hung low like sorrowful spirits, and not even the birds dared to sing. A wide circle formed in the village square, elders on carved stools, women with folded arms, men with furrowed brows, and children peeking from behind their mothers' wrappers. At the center stood Babatunde, barefoot, calm, his hands resting at his sides. His eyes scanned the faces around him, some familiar, some now unfamiliar. Eyes he once trusted now flickered away in shame. Ajani stood opposite, shoulders broad, arms crossed over his chest like a victorious warrior. His voice, sharp and rehearsed, filled the air. I do not speak from bitterness, he began, not but from duty. This village is bleeding, our yams wither, our women weep. The gods have turned their faces, and in times like these we must seek out the root of corruption, no matter how deep it lies. A murmur of agreement flowed through the crowd. One by one, villagers rose and spoke, not from first-hand knowledge, but from fear. I saw smoke near his farm at midnight. My dreams have been haunted. Even the goats avoid his paths. None could prove anything, but in the face of drought and death, even silence was suspicion. Then came Iyalode Morenike, her steps slow but her voice firm. You say the land is sick, but it is not Babatunde who has poisoned it. It is fear. Fear that has blinded us. Fear that has made us forget the years he gave us yam seedlings, medicine leaves, and wise counsel. If we do this, she looked around, her eyes glinting with warning. We curse ourselves. But her wisdom landed like dry leaves on the wind. The village priest, Ifagbai, stepped forward in his white robes, divination beads around his neck. He cast the cowries upon the mat, chanted ancient verses, and finally declared, the spirits have spoken. A cleansing must be done. The earth must swallow the one who carries hidden fire. Only then will Aiyetoro breathe again. Gasps escaped. Some clutched their chests, others wept. Babatunde, still calm, stepped forward and said, if this is the will of the land I have served all my life, then I will not resist. Let the same soil I fed receive me. The silence that followed was unbearable. No one cheered, no one spoke, only the rustling leaves whispering secrets to the wind. And so it was decided. At dusk, they would take Babatunde to the sacred grove of Igbo Orun and bury him alive, not as a criminal but as a sacrifice. The evening of Babatunde's burial arrived like a thief, quiet, heavy, and unwelcome. A hush fell over Aiyetoro as the villagers followed the winding path into the Igbo Orun, the sacred forest believed to connect the world of the living and the spirits. No one spoke. Even the drums were silent that night. The usual chants before a ritual were replaced with a silence so thick it clung to the skin like sweat. The sky was the color of dying embers. Babatunde walked in front, led by Ifagbayi the priest, and two silent young men carrying digging tools. His hands were not bound, he had not resisted. He walked with dignity, his white wrapper flowing like water behind him, and his voice hummed a quiet chant that only the trees seemed to understand. As they reached the center of the grove, the ground had already been prepared, a shallow pit no more than 6 feet deep, rimmed with leaves and palm fronds. The priest raised his hands and began the final incantation. Spirits of the earth, accept this son as offering. Swallow his body so that Aiyetoro may breathe, bind his soul so that the land may heal. Villagers watched, some trembling, others trying to look away. Ajani stood at the edge of the grove, a smirk hidden behind his palm, his eyes dark with victory. Then Babatunde stepped into the grave on his own. Before he lay down, he turned and looked up at the sky, whispering, Olodumare sees, if I have wronged this land, let me sleep forever. But if I have loved it, let its breath awaken me. He lay flat. The priest placed a calabash of river water beside him, then another calabash, this one empty. No one knew why. Only Ifagbayi and the ancestors did. Then the soil began to fall. First palm leaves to cover his body, then sand, one handful at a time. The villagers helped hesitantly. Some wept, a few turned back, unable to continue. The final layer of earth fell, and with it came the first distant roll of thunder, though the sky had no rain. The trees groaned in the wind, and a strange chill passed through the forest like the breath of a spirit. The ground was patted down. A wooden charm was placed above the spot, and the villagers returned to Aiyetoro in silence, leaving behind the man they had once called brother, teacher, friend. That night, no cooking fires were lit, no songs were sung. Only the wind whispered through the village, carrying the weight of guilt and a question too painful to ask. What if we were wrong? In the days that followed Babatunde's burial, Aiyetoro did not find peace. Instead, the village fell deeper into shadow. First came the dreams. One by one, the elders began waking in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, their breath short, their minds echoing with whispers. "He is not gone," the voices said. "He was never meant to be taken." Then came the animals. Goats bleated endlessly and refused to eat. Chickens pecked at their own feathers until they bled. The dogs howled at invisible shadows, and one morning, the village cat was found lifeless at the center of the square, its eyes wide open, as if it had seen something that shattered its spirit. Crops that once stood green and full now twisted into yellow, brittle stalks. The cassava turned to rot in the ground. Palm trees leaned as if bowed under invisible weight. The children too began to suffer. One after another, they fell into strange fevers, sweating and trembling, calling out Babatunde's name in their sleep. One little girl, barely 6, awoke screaming, "The earth is crying! The man is breathing under it!" Panic grew like wildfire. Even Ajani, the proud hunter, began to walk with nervous glances over his shoulder. His arrows missed their targets. His traps stopped catching game. And each time he closed his eyes, he saw Babatunde, not angry but calm, eyes filled with the quiet truth of a man who knows he has been wronged. Then one night, lightning struck the Iroko tree in the center of the village, the very tree where judgment had been passed. It split in two, leaving smoke and ash where once there was wisdom. The people gathered in desperation. Some begged the priest Ifagbayi to reverse the ritual, but he merely shook his head and said, "What is buried cannot be summoned unless the spirits themselves choose." But someone was chosen. That very night, Iyalode Morenike had a vision. She was sitting alone in her hut, grinding herbs, when a strong wind swept through, even though her doors were shut. The air grew thick with the scent of burnt wood and rain. Then the flame in her oil lamp flickered, and a voice spoke, not loud, but steady, deep, and unmistakably divine. "He is not beneath the earth. He is beneath your fear. Go to him." Her hands trembled, her heart pounded, but her spirit, steady. She rose, she tied her headscarf, picked up her staff, and with the strength of the ancestors in her bones, she stepped into the darkness. That night, as moonlight bathed the forest in silver, Iyalode Morenike stood at the edge of Igbo Orun, the sacred grove where Babatunde had been buried. Her staff sank slightly into the damp earth, and the beads on her neck clinked like the warnings of distant spirits. She was not alone. 3 others had followed her: young Sade, whose baby had fallen ill the day after the burial; Kehinde, a hunter's son who once learned farming from Babatunde; and Adeolu, a quiet man who never spoke during the trial but had carried guilt in his eyes ever since. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The air in the grove was heavy with something ancient, thicker than fog, more alive than breath. Every tree seemed to lean in as if listening. Morenike led them to the spot. The charm that marked Babatunde's grave still sat on the surface, but now it was cracked, and the ground around it had shifted, as if the earth had sighed or stirred. Without hesitation, they began to dig. With bare hands, sticks, and trembling fingers, they clawed through soil and roots. The deeper they went, the stranger the night became. Owls hooted 3 times in perfect rhythm. A cold wind passed through leaves that never rustled. Then at the 7th foot, a sound, a hollow echo. Kehinde struck something, a wooden cover, still intact. They cleared more soil, and there, beneath the roots of a great palm tree, they found Babatunde, alive. His eyes were closed, but his chest rose faintly. His face was pale, his beard damp, but there was no doubt he was breathing. Coiled beside him was a small calabash, the same one the priest had placed during the burial. Inside it, a glowing stone that pulsed faintly with light. Not fire, not ember, something older. Morenik touched his hand. "Tunde," she whispered, "it's time." His eyes fluttered open slowly, as if waking from the dream of another world. And when he saw her face, a soft smile formed on his cracked lips. "I told the land to hold me, not to take me," he whispered hoarsely. Tears rolled down Sade's cheeks. Kehinde fell to his knees. Adeolu covered his mouth with both hands. They carried him back, not in secret, but openly. And when the villagers saw Babatunde being led back into Aiyetoro, they did not scream, they did not run. They knelt. one by one. Even Ajani, hidden in the shadows of his compound, trembled, for he knew then that no spear could match the power of a spirit protected by truth. Morning broke with a softness Aiyetoro hadn't felt in weeks. The sun rose quietly, almost shyly, as if waiting to see if it was welcome. A light breeze carried the scent of fresh earth and wet leaves, and for the first time in many nights, the birds began to sing again. Babatunde entered the village slowly, supported by Kehinde and Adiolu, with Iyalo de Morenik and Sade walking ahead. His steps were weak, but his presence was strong, like the first drop of rain after a long drought. Villagers emerged from their huts, eyes wide, mouths open, as if they were seeing a ghost. Some dropped their firewood, others clutched their chests. But Babatunde was no ghost. He stood before them as a man who had met death and returned not with vengeance but with peace. The silence was broken by the faint voice of a child, the same little girl who had cried about the man under the earth. She stepped forward, looked into Babatunde's eyes, and said, Yukotat, you came back because the land told you we were sorry. He smiled, knelt, and kissed her forehead. Then he turned to the crowd. I went beneath the earth, not to escape judgment, but to give you space to hear your own hearts. I saw nothing but silence. I heard only the echo of truth. It was not your chants or rituals that held me, it was mercy. And mercy came from the ones who remembered that I was once your neighbor, not your enemy. People began to cry openly, deep cleansing sobs that loosened the spirit. Even Ifagbai, the priest, once so sure in his rituals, fell to his knees and wept. Forgive me, Babatunde. I saw signs, but not the truth beneath them. Babatunde simply placed a hand on his shoulder and said, You are not the only one who looked without seeing. Then came Ajani. He had not slept for nights. His dreams were haunted, his goats had run away, and his hunting bow had snapped in his hands just that morning. When he stepped forward, his eyes were hollow, his voice low. I was the first stone in the river of lies. I was the one who stirred fear. I cannot undo it. Babatunde looked at him, not with hatred but with sorrow. You cannot uproot a tree that has already bent to the storm catacomb, he said, but you can water what is left and let new fruit grow. Ajani collapsed where he stood and wept. He would not remain in Aiyetoro. Weeks later, he was seen wandering into the deep forest alone, never to return. Some say he was taken by spirits. Others say he became one. But the villagers no longer told tales of Ajani with anger. They spoke of him as a lesson, a shadow that reminded them to never let jealousy wear the mask of justice again. And as for Babatunde, he never returned to his old farm. Instead, he became a teacher, a seer, a voice the elders consulted before making decisions. They built a small shrine near the spot where he was buried alive, marked not with sorrow but with hope. Children played near it, birds perched on its edge, and the land once again began to sing. In the days that followed Babatunde's return, Aiyetoro became a different place. Not because the winds changed or the rains came early, but because the hearts of its people had been broken and rebuilt. The elders declared a cleansing festival, not out of fear this time, but out of gratitude. It was to be held at the foot of the Igbo Oron, where life and death had danced so closely. Every family brought something: kola nuts, woven cloth, palm oil, carved drums, fruits from surviving farms. The women sang ancient songs of rebirth. The children wore white wrappers and painted their faces with sacred chalk. Ifakbai, now a humbled priest, led the ritual. But he did not lead alone. He stood beside Babatunde. Together they poured libation onto the earth. Palm wine soaked into the soil, and the crowd chanted, The land lives, the land forgives, the land breathes again. That evening, Babatunde spoke not as a victim, but as a vessel. What we buried was not just a man. We buried our pride, our haste, our fear. But the land did not accept it. It gave it back to us, alive, so that we may remember. From that day forward, no one in Aiyetoro judged by rumor or fear. Disputes were brought to Iyalode Morenike, who became the voice of reason among the elders. Young people gathered around Babatunde's shrine to learn about plants, about peace, about patience. The once broken village began to heal, and under the shade of a new Iroko tree planted near the shrine, something beautiful happened. Truth became their tradition.